Greetings, loves. Is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, I want to talk about how to get the most out of your training. And when I'm talking about training, I'm not talking about taking classes or reading books or watching YouTube videos. I'm talking about you actually training on your own, both in live fire and dry fire, and how to critically approach that in a way that doesn't waste your time, that is efficient, and is getting the most out of that time that you're spending doing your training, because none of us have a huge luxury of time generally, and it is really important to make sure that you are optimal in your approach. Now, I asked a bunch of different friends of varying levels of experience in shooting, how they approach training, what they found are the most effective strategies, and I've also included some of my own experience in this discussion too, of course. And I figured it would just be good to kind of get people thinking more and more about how they can improve their practice. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, first and foremost, let's talk about training cycles. And by training cycles, I mean, how do you balance your live fire and dry fire regimens? First of all, the idea is that you need to go to the range, try things out with live fire, see what you struggle with, what you need work on, diagnose that, go home, troubleshoot it, pick things apart, isolate certain motions and skills that you're having trouble with, and work through them in dry fire. Once you feel like you got those down pat, you're gonna go back to the range and then apply what you've learned in live fire and make sure that you're actually improving. Your live fire is a confirmation of your dry fire learning habits, and so it's really important to balance both of these out. Now, if you just go to the range and live fire all the time, you might just be wasting ammo, you might not actually be practicing enough outside of the range, especially if you're not going to the range every single day. Most of us simply just don't have that luxury. So dry fire is really, really crucial for you to actually be able to take the time to hone your skills. Now, the opposite also applies. If you're just sitting at home all the time dry firing, you're probably not necessarily going to be getting that much out of your practice. You need to make sure that you go to the range to confirm that you are learning the things that you need to be learning and you're applying them. You can also get a lot of training scars from dry fire because you're not practicing with recoil, and recoil is a huge, huge factor. And I know I harp on doing dry fire a lot here, but there are some people who definitely take this a little bit too far, and they actually neglect what they're learning, and they're not really applying it, and they're not making sure that they're applying it properly. So balance these two things out. Keep this as a cycle that repeats over and over and over again, and you should be on track to rapidly improve your shooting skills. Now, let's dive in a little further into how we approach dry fire. First of all, if your dry fire motions and drills and all of that seem to be going perfect and you just seem to be really good at what you're doing, then you're not doing it right. You need to identify things that become a problem and work through them in dry fire, as I said before. For example, if I'm on the range and I notice that when I transition targets, I pull the trigger a little too early, then I need to slow myself down, practice target transitions in dry fire, deliberately make sure that I am pulling that trigger once sights are actually properly on target. When I'm transitioning between targets, I don't want to be pulling that trigger too late or too early, and I want to make sure that I'm accurately moving my gun onto the target. So make sure that you're breaking these things down, identify problems as they occur. Furthermore, in your dry fire, it's really important to isolate certain elements or movements that you're struggling with. Don't do full range of motion drills, don't run all the way through all these drills in dry fire if you're trying to focus and troubleshoot and improve upon a certain thing that you're struggling with. For example, if I am reloading and I notice that when I'm reloading, I maybe have a weird orientation where I struggle to get my mag properly into the mag well, I don't want to be doing drills that involve me drawing from holster, doing a full reload, releasing the mag, grabbing a mag, putting the mag inside the gun, chambering around, etc. I just want to work on isolating things that I'm struggling with, because the rest of it is just going to be a waste of time. What you want to do is simply just make sure that you're getting the motion right, where you're orienting both your gun and your mag in your hand, and that is going cleanly into the mag well. That's all I should be focusing on if that's what I'm struggling with. Other drills are good to do in full range of motion just to make sure that you are getting everything down pat, but don't ever just make your dry fire about running drills for the sake of running drills. You need to specifically isolate the elements that you're struggling with and keep going at them until you feel that you're satisfied with your performance. Then again, apply that at the range with live fire and make sure that you're still retaining that information. Also, I know I harp on this a lot, but get a shot timer. It's not only just nice to be able to keep track of how fast you're going and how well you're doing between your drill times and your split times and all of that, first shot, time to first shot. Those are all really important metrics that we can use to reference how we're progressing and where we're at. But furthermore, a lot of shot timers have a par time feature, which basically means that you have a beep, that's where you start the drill, and then you set a certain amount of time until a second beep, and that's the end of the drill. The idea here is that you're trying to complete this drill, or whatever, this movement, motion, elements, whatever, under the amount of time that you've set for that par time. Now, if you're feeling really good, it's easy, you're consistent, everything is looking good, you're not done, you should be constantly challenging yourself, and you should bring that par time down and constantly be pushing yourself out of your comfort zone so that you can get better and better. I know this sounds really basic, but a lot of people really neglect this function on their shot timers, and in dry fire, that's an extremely useful tool. I also want to add that dry fire aids can be really fun, they can be engaging, and they can encourage you to keep trying to dry fire. That's really good. If that's true for you, keep at it. But you need to look at your dry fire aids and tools very critically because they don't necessarily allow you to do everything with them. There's a ton of different things in dry fire that they just won't help out with. And if you make your dry fire about using those aids, you're approaching this all backwards. You need to be actually just dry firing for the sake of troubleshooting what you need to work through. If the dry fire aid helps you through that, so be it. That's great. But it definitely will narrow the scope of how you approach dry fire, and it's really important to not become too reliant on them. The truth is, if you have a gun, that's all you really need for dry fire. That's it. You don't need any lasers, you don't need any snap caps unless your gun can't dry fire safely without those, of course. And even shot timers, honestly, yeah, maybe not necessary, but highly recommended. But yeah, ultimately, if all you got is your gun, that's okay. You can do pretty much everything that you need to do in dry fire with that. Next, I want to talk about certain elements that you want to pay very close attention to and get into the habit of doing as you are working through your training, and things to just really focus on. First and foremost is vision focus. Now, vision focus is extremely important. Obviously, you want to focus on the target as you shoot at it, but you need to obviously pay attention to your sights, make sure that you're aiming at your target first of all, but watch what your sights do as you shoot. Now, my optic here, by the way, you should get an optic, is going to tell me a ton. I can see every little movement that my gun makes, even as I pull that trigger, and that's going to give me a lot of very, very good feedback. Optics are really good for this because they just simply show you more. You can try to use your iron sights, you can pay attention to those, but they just don't give you quite the same amount of feedback. Optics will generally just make you a better shooter, but they'll also make you a better trainer. And they will really greatly improve your ability to troubleshoot the things that you are doing in live fire and dry fire. All your diagnosis starts with your sights. They're going to tell you all about your grip, about your trigger timing, and your recoil management. I can see when I present on target, yes, I'm presenting consistently. I'm on target as I pull that trigger. It's staying on the target, it's not moving. If I transition between targets, I can make sure that I'm staying on target and that I'm not pulling that trigger too soon or too late. It gives me all of that feedback, and that's super helpful in both dry fire and live fire. Another really important thing to keep in mind with vision focus is that if you are using something like an IPSC target with a generic A-zone box, as long as you land those shots in those A-zones, they count. It doesn't really matter how close to the middle they are. That's all well and good in practice when you're training, but we really want to be aiming at a specific point within that A-zone. That will give you a lot more consistency. It's going to be a lot less likely for you to land a shot outside of the A-zone if you got a good reference point within it. So when you're training with things like IPSC targets, get some sort of visual reference sticker. It could be a literal sticker, it could be just a piece of tape. You could mark a dot on the middle of the A-zone and just make sure that you're consistently indexing your sights on that point. That will give you much better results, much better consistency, and will get you thinking more accurately. Another really important thing to practice is trigger control at speed. Now, all of us can do slow fire, no problem. Line up on target, pull that trigger back, squeeze very slowly, hit the wall, and break, and wow. 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 My sights are still on target. Nailed it, easy, no problem. That should be easy. But a lot of the time, you're not going to have that luxury to just simply take time staging your trigger. You want to be able to start with your finger not on the trigger or barely touching the trigger, set your shot timer, let it go beep. As soon as you hear the beep, violently pull that trigger. Now, when I did that, I noticed that my sights moved. So what I want to do is improve my grip here and make sure that I'm not letting my trigger pull actually jerk the gun around, and that as soon as I smash that trigger, it's still on target. If so, that's great. If not, work on your support side grip, work on your points of contact and your butt pad position on your shoulder if it's a long gun. Make sure that your form is good. You know you got work to do. So make sure that you're practicing trigger control at speed. Make sure that you're practicing this because you may not have the luxury to slow fire. And furthermore, if you're doing follow-up shots, you're going to be probably doing them in rapid succession, and you're not going to feel that wall. Feeling the wall is not going to help you here. So make sure that you are actually just smashing that trigger as fast as you can while maintaining consistent sight alignment. Another thing to work through is your flinch response. Now, before I get into it, there's a whole video I put out about this. Watch that video if you really are worried about it. I go into a lot more detail, but the basics is that a lot of us, when we're doing live fire, have a tendency to flinch before we actually finish pulling the trigger, causing sight alignment to go down and shooting low, maybe to the left or right. And that's just pre-ignition movement. Because your brain is flinching, it's telling you to flinch to counteract that recoil prematurely. Generally, good mechanics, good fundamentals, good grip, good form, good points of contact if it's a long gun will be the remedy for this. We all suffer from flinch response. That is just a normal human thing. We always have to be working through it. And yes, it's good to try to counteract this mentally with your brain and train your brain to not do that in the first place. But what's even better is that even if you are flinching, you've got good mechanics and good fundamentals to counteract that, so it's not even really a factor. Go to the range on a quiet day, make sure that there aren't other shots going off around you that are inoculating you to gunfire, and that you're just focusing on the gunfire that is prompting you to flinch from your own gun. Next, let's talk about some good habits that can be incorporated into your practice. First and foremost, consistency. Consistency is extremely important. As I talked about before with training cycles between dry fire and live fire, make sure that you're doing all of that regularly. You got a pretty regular schedule of going through your dry fire, going through your live fire at the range, repeating that over and over again, not just making that an affair for certain months of the year or whatever. Just keep it going throughout your entire life as long as you're shooting. Furthermore, keep in mind that if you are doing dry fire, being consistent with that is really important too. 2 hours in once a week is not going to give you as much benefit as just having 5 minutes of dry fire every single day of the week. You're going to probably be biting off more than you can chew with one big block out of the week. You're not going to retain that much information, you're going to get fatigued, and it just isn't going to necessarily be that beneficial for you. As opposed to doing dry fire 5 minutes a day every single day of the week, you're going to be very focused on what you need to be working on, you're going to be working through it, you're not going to be biting off more than you can chew, and you're going to develop really good habits over time. Furthermore, when you go to the range for live fire, you can also dry fire there. Don't necessarily just waste ammo for the sake of wasting it. If you identify something that you need to work on and you can dry fire through it, work through some reps in dry fire at the range. It might look a little silly, but ultimately is very wise. Just save the ammo for when you're actually trying to apply your lessons, and don't just be trying to learn as you shoot live ammo. Another really important thing is to experiment with and try new things. Just because you have some sort of doctrine that you've been following, some sort of training, whatever somebody told you to do, or even if it is necessarily just the right thing to do because that's what everyone's saying, that doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. Everyone's different, everyone shoots different, we're all shooting different guns, we got different bodies.
My body, my choice.
Habits, strengths, and weaknesses, so just try things out. If it's an idea, it's not crazy to try it out. Just because it seems unconventional or something, as long as it's safe, why not? If I feel like I'm not getting really good support side grip, maybe I want to look at how my thumbs are oriented on the side of the frame. Oh, wow, they look a little bit high. Maybe I'm going to bring my thumbs down a little bit. Oh, that feels a lot stronger. Then I try that in live fire. If I notice that my shooting gets better, then I've tried something and learned something, and now I can apply that moving forward to get better and better. It's never a bad idea to just simply think outside the box and experiment. It's also really important to diversify your drills. Don't just get good at shooting bill drills at 7 yards standing up. You need to diversify how you're approaching drills, introduce new drills constantly for yourself, because otherwise you're just teaching the test and you're going to game the drill, and it's going to become more about the drill than you actually improving your shooting skills. Make sure that you're keeping yourself on your toes by engaging different kinds of targets at different ranges, in different shooting positions, and just staying more dynamic. Furthermore, this is a really, really good reason why competition shooting is good, because it will put you in a situation, in a course of fire that you've probably never ran before and never will again. And it does it cold. You don't get to keep doing this over and over again so that you're perfect at this one course of fire. It's going to absolutely keep you on your toes, the scores are not going to lie, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself and what you need to work on. Another really important thing to keep in mind when you're running drills is to follow through no matter what. If you screw up your draw from your holster, if you fumble your reload and drop a mag, it doesn't matter. Keep going. Just because you are trying to get the best time on the clock as possible doesn't necessarily mean that you are building good habits. Building a habit to just stop everything when you experience the slightest inconvenience in shooting is just not how the real world works. If you're in a competition environment and your draw is not clean, you can't stop the competition. You've got to keep going and retry that. If you fumble a magazine and a reload and, heaven forbid, a defensive shooting, that's not really going to work. People aren't going to be able to put pause on reality. Waiting for ideal conditions and restarting things over builds pretty bad training scars, and it really prevents you from being more dynamic and thinking on your feet quickly and troubleshooting under pressure. Another big one is don't shoot too many guns. You may be a collector and have a lot of guns, that's totally cool, no judgment here, but if you're trying to get good at shooting, you're not going to do it by shooting a ton of different guns. You're going to have many platforms, you're going to have tons of different handguns of different shapes and sizes, and things are not going to necessarily translate uniformly across each platform, across each handgun. You're going to almost certainly develop training scars because you've been shooting one gun one way and suddenly the next one is in your hands and it just is being shot like the previous gun you had in your hands. And that's not really a good habit. When I go to the range, I generally bring at most 2 guns. And really, honestly, I pretty much only shoot 2 guns for the most part in general. Now, there's exceptions to that. I feel like I honestly have too many guns and I really just have a handful because I want to get really good at shooting them and I cannot possibly dedicate all my time to getting good at each single one. So slimming down the guns that you are actually trying to get proficient with at the very least is a really important step. Make sure that you're not developing any training scars and that you're not spreading yourself too thin. Getting good at just a few things is going to be a lot better than just being a jack of all trades. Another really big one, and a one that I really don't want to have to even acknowledge as a thing that I need to say here, but I'm gonna say it because I see it all the time, is when people go to the range, they often put up a piece of cardboard and they shoot some mags into it, their friend shoots some mags into it, they go home, throw that thing away, don't even look at it, because there's no useful information on it. They're possibly just there to blink and like, you do you. I think that's a huge waste of time and it's very stupid.
Stop it!
But I'm not gonna rain on your parade, but if you're trying to get good, you need to mark your hits. You need to track your hits, track your progress, do a drill, stop shooting, call range cold, go to the target, see where your shots landed, mark them or cover them up, and then do that drill again and compare how you did between each time. Rinse and repeat. If you are just blasting paper for the sake of blasting paper and all your friends are just absolutely shredding paper on the range, you know, I guess like if having something explode in your hands is like the only reason you're there, then sure, but otherwise you're not getting anything out of your training. So just make sure to keep track of your hits every single time you run a drill. Furthermore, train with your friends, whether it's live fire or dry fire. having friends around you, for one, obviously makes it more fun. It's a social thing. That can help encourage you to further train more and more, but it also keeps you accountable. Even in dry fire, if somebody notices that I'm doing something weird, they can point it out. I may not notice that I'm having some bad habits being developed in my dry fire, so having another set of eyes just to be able to call you out, keep you accountable, keep you honest with yourself is really, really valuable. And last but not least, another good habit to get into is logging your drill times. Now, I know I said before to diversify your drills, but if you do have some certain standard drills that you like to run, if you're just trying to work on something between different range trips, it's probably a good idea to write down your drill times so that you know where you're at. You can keep track of them, see if you're slipping, then further work to diagnose and troubleshoot the elements within that drill, because that will just tell you what you need to work on. Again, it'll keep you honest with yourself. It's not going to delude you into thinking that you're really fast just because that seemed like a fast time. What is a fast time for you? Log those things down, keep track of your progress. It's going to really help pay off in the long run. And so those are just some of the ways that you can get the most out of your practice. This is by no means a definitive, exhaustive list of every single thing that you need to know. This is just a few chunks of wisdom that I'm trying to drop on y'all. There's so much more to be said on this. I probably will make more videos like this moving on in the future. And furthermore, if you have your own wisdom, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Don't be shy, be sure to chime in and let us know what you think. Furthermore, if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. And as always, huge shout out to all my all-stars on Patreon who are keeping this channel afloat. This is a one-girl show for the most part, except for the ladies that film me at the range. I don't run ads on this channel, I don't make money on it in any other way, and I hate to be annoying, but this is basically the only way that I can recoup the time, energy, and money that I sink into this project, so anything that you can contribute is greatly appreciated. If you want to go help out, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. And that's all the advice I've got for you today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there, and as always, please take care. Bye!